Hey guys, welcome back to an interesting video on Wild Rift. So today we're here with the rundown for patch 6.1D. So already onto the D patch, and we're very likely to have an E patch at the minimum after this, but the D patch has brought a ton of changes, and hopefully you guys have been enjoying the daily uploads from myself. This is going to be a bonus one, so 2 videos in one day just to cover the patch notes. We have quite a number of changes in this patch. First off, we have the addition of Zilean, the Chrono Keeper, and the skills have already kind of been released on Wild Rift's official YouTube channel, so I've kind of already checked that one out. He did get a sort of mini rework compared to the PC version because he does have a new ability on his E, which will slow projectiles and enemies, which seems to be a very huge useful zone control tool. However, he doesn't seem to have a lot of damaging abilities. It's basically only his Q that's a damaging ability, so he does seem like he's going to be a little bit more suited for the support role, at least from what I can tell. Right, so when Zilean releases on June the 13th, at the same time we have the new WoW Pass, as well as the new collected legends. We have a new companion, and some new modes are going to be coming out, or rather not new, but they're going to be rotating back into the game. So we have a number of champion changes, and we have 2 kind of reworks. The first one is Ambessa. So what they say is that Ambessa's cleanup ability and passive damage are pretty unreasonable, and there's no counterplay, which I completely agree with. I think Ambessa having this reset mechanic in Wild Rift compared to PC where she doesn't is just kind of whack, right? Because she really just becomes a very different champion than what she is in PC, where there she's kind of a frontline fighter and tank, whereas here it's almost more assassin-like, where you want to get that initial kill at no matter the cost, and then you're going to be able to reset and then kill multiple other people, sort of like how a Katarina works, or how a Riven, Wild Rift Riven works, right? So let's take a look at what's changed. So first up is the Drakehound Step, her passive, which is the dash, right? Also, so here we got the bonus damage. It used to be 1 plus champion level multiplied by 3, and then 1.5 plus 0.02% attack damage to the target's max health. So now it's going to be 11.5 plus champion level times 2.5, and then 25% bonus AD. Now, I'm not even going to try to kind of calculate what the difference here is. I'm not really sure if this is a buff or nerf. I cannot be bothered to do the math, but basically they're getting changed here. The rest of the changes are a lot more obvious, so we're going to talk about those. So first up, we have Cunning Sweep / Thundering Slam. This is her Q, which has 2 parts. The first part is, of course, the arc, and the second part is the slam, right, which does percent missing health damage, right? So first up, damage in the semicircle is going from this plus 60% to now, I'm not sure why they split it up into 2 parts, but it used to be more straightforward. It used to be a flat number plus a bonus. Now it's a flat number which is less, right? And then plus 30% bonus AD. And then you're now going to get a percentage max health, I guess. So it's going to be, it used to be just base damage. Now it's base damage plus max health damage. So overall, this is going to be more useful against champions who are tankier, but against champions who are squishier, this should be less damage, right? So then we have the Blade Edge, right? So of course you could hit someone within the small semicircle, which is the area close to you, and then you have the Blade Edge, right? Blade Edge, of course, gives you additional damage, right? So you're pretty much getting the same treatment, where they're splitting up the damage into base damage as well as the bonus max health damage. So overall, I think that overall this is more of a buff than a nerf. It's just an adjustment, but I think it's more of a buff than a nerf, because you can deal with tankier champions more easily, and your damage to squishy champions doesn't decrease by that much. So next up is Thundering Slam, which is the linear ability, the second part of it. So it used to be, well, basically, again, a number plus AAD ratio, and then now it's once again going to have max health damage. So first target that's hit, once again, I believe it is the same treatment, giving max health damage, and now there's a damage ratio cap for monsters' maximum health. Yeah, so this is just to kind of cut her jungle clear speed a little bit, because I think they want Ambessa in the top lane more than the jungle, but essentially, I feel that her Q is more of a buff than a nerf. So on her W, you now have immunity to crowd control for 0.5 seconds while casting. Now, I think this is pretty fair, and the reason I say that is because with Ambessa, 0.5 seconds of crowd control immunity is very difficult to use, right? So you have to really be skillful to actually use this crowd control immunity correctly to immune any kind of crowd control, because 0.5 seconds is very punishing. If you mistime it, it's not going to really work out. Cooldown is going up by 1 second. It's not too big of a deal. Shockwave damage is going up in terms of base damage as well as AD ratio, right? And also the shockwave damage dealt when damage successfully blocked. Yeah, I don't quite know what that is, right? What do you mean when damage successfully blocked? But anyways, is it successfully blocking CC? I'm not sure. So does she get a damage amplification when she blocks CC? I don't really know what this is, but basically her W is just getting a huge buff, right? So her ulti is, of course, the passive where you get the reset is removed, and restoring health according to health loss with the reset is also removed. However, you now are going to gain armor pen and ability vamp from leveling up your ultimate. So getting free like armor penetration and getting free ability vamp is pretty huge, right? This is a bit like Pantheon where you get free armor penetration for no reason, and this is really huge because Ambessa doesn't really build armor penetration items. She doesn't build Serelda, she doesn't build Terminus, she doesn't build Mole Reminder. So this armor penetration that she's getting is literally just free, right? She doesn't really build it anyway, and I feel that she's gonna still be pretty strong, right? And then you have health restore from minions being reduced and monsters being reduced as well. And you have a new active where you have 30% damage reduction when she is unstoppable, right? So that means in the time where she's flying towards the enemy, she's going to get damage reduction. Now, honestly, I think this doesn't really matter because how often is it that you get hit while you're in flight? I feel it's not very often, so it's overall not going to matter. So essentially, to summarize the changes, Ambessa is no longer getting an ability reset as well as a health gain when she kills people. However, her Q is getting a buff, her W is getting a buff, and her ulti is getting a buff as well. So overall, actually, funnily enough, I think this actually is going to make Ambessa stronger, right? Because even though she can't reset, she just gets higher numbers on everything, right? So overall, I still think she's going to be really strong. It seems that she might even get better, right? Like, she's going to be playing a different style because you don't necessarily want to aim the backline, one shot the squishy carry, reset, and then kill everybody else. You may still want to do that, but there's definitely a lot more ways to play Ambessa now. Maybe you can go for the front line first and use the percent health damage to deal with them and such, right? So Fiora is also kind of getting what they like to call a mini rework, but really it's more so of a buff, right? So firstly, your passive, which reveals vitals, is yeah, the reveals and marks vitals on nearby enemy champion is going up by 0.25 seconds. This almost doesn't really matter, and the duration of vital marks will reduce when Grand Challenge levels up, which is the ulti. Don't really think this matters all that much if I'm understanding it correctly. So this one probably matters, right? So lunge, speed of lunge will be impacted by movement speed. So the higher your movement speed, the faster your lunge is going to be, right? I don't really think Fiora really takes Ghost or anything like that, and I don't really know what kind of movement speed items she could possibly go for, but the scaling of movement speed is definitely a something that is gonna help, because of course you're gonna lunge faster, and that's gonna of course just help you out in general. And you can now lunge against wards, traps, and fruit, right? So this is something you could always do in PC, which is an auto Q, auto a ward, but in Wild Rift you couldn't do that. So now you actually can. Same with the ward jump with Jax, you can now do that in Wild Rift. The search range of the vials is increased. Now I don't really know what this means, right? Because the range of the Q is still the same. So what do they mean by the search range of vials is increased, right? I don't really know what this means. Does this mean the range of the Q is bigger? Or what does this mean, right? And then the basic damage is going down by a little bit, but they have some kind of error here. I think they're missing a 5. I think this is 105, because it's a 10 damage decrease everywhere. And then Grand Challenge, you don't have a cast time anymore. This is what used to be the cast time. You're no longer going to have a cast time. And you have now a passive where it takes scaling up reduction for marking vials. Basically, the vials are going to appear faster, right? You know, like the vials kind of turn blue, and then they turn like gold when they are ready to be destroyed. So now that is going to be shorter duration, basically. And ulti no longer stacks runes. I didn't even know the ulti stacks runes. I didn't know you get a Conqueror stack for ulting someone, but you're not going to get that anymore. Darius is getting a buff on his passive, just a little bit more damage overall, also to jungle monsters. Now this 150% ratio on jungle monsters is what makes jungle Darius viable in the first place. They're just making it even better, and basically it's just a minor buff to Darius, right? Jax getting a pretty major buff, to be honest. So here you have damage to monsters increasing from 125 to 175. Now Jax is viable in the jungle, but his clear is not really that fast, so this is gonna make his clear faster, and then this is gonna make Jax a lot more viable in the jungle. So I think it's a pretty big buff for Jax, actually. So Nunu, the consume, is getting a buff. a little bit more health, and the health regen is just a little bit more. Minor buffs here. The shield value you're getting also just minor buffs there by 5%. So overall just minor buffs to Nunu. Fiddle also getting some pretty minor buffs. You get a little bit more base damage on your W, as well as a little bit of bonus AP ratio, and the ulti is getting a 10-second buff. So overall, I think this stacks up and this matters. Right? Base damage plus ratio means that you're going to be doing a little bit more damage in the later stage of the game, especially, and of course getting your ulti cooldown reduced, which of course is Fiddlesticks. You're really mainly picking Fiddlesticks for the ulti, right? So getting a cooldown reduction on the ulti is pretty huge. Pantheon Spear getting a 10 damage buff, as well as the crit one getting a 10 damage buff. Overall 10 damage is not too huge. I think Pantheon's in a decent spot. I think this is not too big of a deal at all. Diana did get that rework where you can like move around with her ultimate, but she hasn't really been played all that much, so they are giving her a buff, right? So first off, her passive, the Moonsilver Blade, is you can see here it used to be 15 base, now it's 20 base, which is extra 10 damage and extra 5 damage, sorry, and this is pretty much negligible. Like extra 5 damage really doesn't mean very much. Right, next is her E. She's getting an extra AP ratio, as well as a little bit of a base damage buff. Overall, very minor enough to Diana. I don't think it matters all that much. Katarina, health per level going up slightly, so she's going to be slightly tankier. And the Veracity, which is the passive, is getting a very slight buff. The main change here is this 4% is now going to 4.5% of your AP. So you get an extra 0.5% AP ratio. That's very, very minor. It does matter, but you have to think about this, right? For every 100 AP you get extra 0.5 AP. So at the end of the day, you're gonna get like an extra, like what, maybe like 2-3 AP. So really, it's really almost negligible, right? The movement speed you gain from your W is now going up by 10%. Now this actually matters because the W movement speed can help you just run away or run towards an enemy. But overall, they haven't really changed her damage that much. A little bit more movement speed, a little bit more health. It's just a very, very minor buff, like a lot of the other champions in this patch. So Ahri base health going up by 30. This matters a lot. Base health is a very important stat for basically every champion, because this really matters in the early levels, like levels 1 to 5 in lane, whether or not you can survive a gank, survive a solo kill, something like that. Orb of Deception, the Q, the bread and butter ability. Damage is going up by 5% AP ratio for both the outward and inward of the orb. So you're getting extra 5% AP ratio. It's gonna matter in the mid and late game. That's pretty decent. Foxfire, target searching range will temporarily increase when Ahri's basic attack or charm hits enemy champions or epic monsters. And Foxfire be cast quicker with the enemy target. Now this is a pretty interesting one, because what this suggests is nowadays with the Ahri rework and the charm no longer amplifying damage against enemies, you don't actually have to start off the combo with charm, right? You can hold the charm to the middle or the end of the combo, which is what a lot of people actually do if you're good on Ahri. So having this now incentivizes you to hit the charm first, right? Because if you hit the charm, you will have bonus range on the W, right? So you can ult in, charm, and then W, and then you can land the W onto a target. And also, when you target the enemy, like you click on their portrait, it will be cast more quickly, which actually, again, it actually matters, right? Because getting off more DPS is always going to be a good thing. So decent buffs to Ahri. Now Yasuo, shield value is getting a huge buff, right? So firstly, the base value is going up just by a little bit, but it's now getting a 100% crit strike rate ratio. That is pretty huge, right? Because at one item, like assuming you buy a crit item, and one item that's extra 50, right? And a second item is extra 100, right? So getting 100 extra shield on top of what he's already getting is nothing to scoff at. Now the only thing is, of course, he did get that nerf previous patch, or 2 patches ago in 6.1b, where his shield is for a lower duration. So he's getting a bigger shield for a lower duration, but if you trigger it, or not if you trigger it, if the enemy team triggers it and full combos you, you're gonna block a lot more damage this patch than last patch. So it is a pretty decent buff. Now his damage on Q is going up by 5% AD ratio, and on the crit also going up by a little bit of an AD ratio, so a buff to Yasuo. Sweeping Blade, the cooldown of his E is going down by 1 second against the same enemy. This is pretty minor. And the last breath, the ulti, Armor pen is now going up from 30% to 50%. So I don't know why he's getting free 50% armor pen from out of nowhere. That's like more than an armor penetration item, by the way. Armor penetration item gives you 33%, right? And this is giving him a free 50% armor penetration, which is why Yasuo doesn't ever need to build armor penetration items. So this is pretty huge. Yasuo's getting a pretty huge buff in my opinion. Samira getting a buff as well. I mean, most champions in this patch are getting buffs. Samira movement speed going up by 0.5, pretty minor but helpful. Flare, the Q bonus damage is going base damage, not base damage but AD ratio going up by 10%. Very helpful in the mid to late game. And the dash on her E is getting extra 10% attack speed. Overall, nice round of buffs to Samira. Should make her quite a bit better. She's really one of the weakest ADCs at the moment. Pretty much only maybe Kalista and Twitch are weaker than her, but yeah, she's not in an amazing spot. Draven is also not that great right now because there's so many other ADCs that are better. He's also getting a 10% AD buff on his Q, which is actually pretty important because Draven loves just building pure AD, like with Bloodthirster and IE as your first two items very often. There's just a ton of AD, and getting extra 10% AD ratio is pretty huge, right? Then we have Thresh, who is getting a 4 base damage increase, and the death sentence Q cooldown is going down by 1 second. Very minor buff, yeah, a lot like the Diana one or a lot of the other champions in this patch. Nautilus health going up by 8 base health. Armor per level going up by 0.7. Again, pretty minor buff, but yeah, but helps him a little bit. Damage from his Q going up by a little bit in the earlier ranks, but going down by a little bit at the higher ranks. Overall, that's a buff because Nautilus's damage is way more effective in the early game than the late game. At least for like support Nautilus. AP Nautilus is a completely different thing, and I'm not too familiar with AP Nautilus because I've never played it. But this I think is more of a buff than a nerf in my opinion. The Riptide, which is the ulti, the damage of sorry, that's not the ulti, that's the E. The damage of each wave is just going up by 10. So overall, again, a pretty minor buff to Nautilus. A lot of minor buffs in this patch. Volley health regen under Frenzy is going down because Volley is pretty strong right now. Shield duration is also going down by 0.5 seconds. So Volley is finally taking a hit. He has been pretty strong for quite some time now in both the jungle as well as the Baron lane. So nice to see he's getting hit. Now Nocturne, our newest addition. Most people think he's pretty strong. I think that he's pretty okay. Like definitely strong, but definitely not weak. But I don't think he's really that good. I don't rate him too highly personally. Although he is of course one of the better junglers. The damage on his Q, which is the bread and butter ability, is going down. And the additional damage you gain on the trail is also going down by a little bit, especially at the higher rank. So small hit to Nocturne, shouldn't matter too much. Now Corki, who I do think is way overtuned and is pretty strong, getting a 4 base AD nerf, which of course matters. Now base AD nerfs hurt the most on ADCs because ADCs auto attack the most and you make use of AD a lot. So 4 AD nerf on Corki definitely does hurt. Gatling gun damage per second is going down by 5, not too bad, and also by 5% AD ratio. Again, small buff but not too, small nerf but not too bad. And shredding the target's armor and magic resistance is going down just by a little bit. Scaling just going down by a little bit, 22 to 25, just a little bit. So overall, I think the base AD nerf hurts a lot more. The Gatling gun nerf is not too bad, but yeah, Corki getting nerfed a little bit definitely seems like the right idea. Now Seraphine, I think is a very underrated support. Ever since the Lucili boots came out, I think Seraphine actually has been one of the best supports, but a lot of people have not yet caught on. But I guess enough people caught on to skyrocket her win rate, which is why Riot is nerfing Seraphine. The cooldown on her W, which of course is the main spell that's important if you're playing support Seraphine, cooldown is going up, and the shield value is going down, and the AP ratio is going down. Just because Seraphine is just way too strong as it stands, right? So we have a lot of ARAM changes. I'm not going to talk too much about that, but we also have this interesting thing they sneaked in at the end, which is that after all this huge scrolling of ARAM changes, you have system changes. So turrets, right? So outer and inner turrets now have additional armor and magic resist, which will take effect in the first 3 or 6 minutes of the game respectively, then gradually decay as the game progresses. Now, I think the inner turret run doesn't matter too much, but the outer turret gains additional armor and magic resist that decays from 300 to 0 over 3 minutes. Now, what does this mean? Well, basically, for the first 3 minutes of the game, the outer turret is going to get extra tanky, right? And how does this impact it? Well, basically, in most games, it's not really going to matter too much because in the first 3 minutes of the game, most of the time, nothing happens. However, there are going to be those games that happen now and again where either you just destroy the enemy, slash they destroy you, or your jungler comes and camps them and ganks them and they die, and this then allows you to take tower plates. So if that now happens, you're no longer really going to be able to take very much tower plates, or any at all, because that tower is going to be so damn tanky that you can't get tower plates. So this is effectively punishing you from killing people early, and kind of giving you a safety net if you do get killed early, so the enemy team doesn't just completely destroy your tower on your first death, which honestly normally you don't really get your tower destroyed too badly after one death. It's normally 1 to 2 plates because the death timers are short. The inner one I think really doesn't matter because it gains additional armor and magic resist that decays from 600 to 0 over 6 minutes, so it's the same kind of scaling, but it's over 6 minutes. So this is in the very rare instance that you take down an entire tower before 7:30 in the game, right? Take down the outer tower. That will now allow you to move to the inner tower. But most of the time if you do this, you're going to want to rotate away anyway. You're not really going to want to be going for the inner tower. So I think this change is not really too bad. It doesn't really impact you very much. I think the outer turret damage does actually impact you quite a bit. So there is that. But anyways, with that, the only skins coming out is Blood Moon Zilean. And with that, we're at the end of the patch rundown. So thank you guys so much for watching the video, and goodbye.